Welcome everyone to Storytime with the Morrigan. I wanted to kind of switch things up this year. Each month, as we focus on a specific goddess, I wanted to pay her homage. I wanted to do something that honored her. And yes, we were talking about her. We do guided meditations, there's a devotional card, but it just didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like we were getting to like her core, her essence. So I wanted to separate, kind of break apart the new moon gathering, because we always talk about the goddess there, but we also talk about the new moon, the astrology, the energetics. So I wanted to kind of separate the goddess. So she has her own little video talking about her and what she represents and her myths, and then we'll do the new moon gathering on its own as its own kind of entity, um, ceremony as such. So let's dive into the Morrigan. A lot of people think the Morrigan represents three different goddesses, and she's a combination of those deities. But no one agrees on who the Morrigan actually is. Um, there's different levels of thought, right? So she could be a compromise, or she can be a combination of Ved, Matcha, Naaman, Neiman, um, the Morgu herself. She's also seen in some of the myths as Danu, which is the mother goddess. Um, so there's quite a combination of goddesses that she could be. Um, for simplicity's sake, for the sake of diving in, I mean, just getting to know her, we're saying she's one deity. She is Morrigan. The thing with Celtic mythology is that it was an oral tradition. Nothing was written down. Celtic mythology wasn't written down until the early 1100s, and that was because Ireland was becoming Christianized. That's when the Romans came in, and Christian monks started to kind of write all of these myths and legends down. But they did it through their viewpoint, right? So all of Celtic mythology is kind of seen through the lens with this Christian perspective. So it's not like we always get the truth of it. So um, yes, so just know that there's kind of that, I don't want to say fault, but it's just, I mean, that's the thing with all stories, right? Is they're told from one perspective, right? And one viewpoint. Um, the thing, I mean, we're used to Egyptian mythology and Greek and Roman mythology, they had written language, right? Or at least hieroglyphics, or they wrote it down and it was passed on. And Celtic and even Norse mythology was, I shouldn't say that. I mean, it was written down later on, right? It was passed on through oral tradition. So obviously, as stories get retold and retold, they change over time. Anyways, I think you get my point. um, so the Morrigan is the goddess, the Celtic goddess of battle, war, and prophecy. A lot of people see her as the dark goddess, right? This warrior goddess. She's the goddess of death. She's known as the Phantom Queen. She is queen of the other world. The other world is kind of like the underworld. It's just this separate realm, right? Um, and she's often symbolized as the crow. The crow, as an animal totem, as a spirit guide, a spirit animal, is represents this animal that can go between the realms, right? Our realm and the other realm, the messenger of divinity, the messenger of the gods. So, and she appears as a crow in several of her myths. She's a shapeshifter, right? She takes on a lot of different forms, and we'll see that through her myths too as we go through them. Um, so she's a magical deity. Um, what you get with her is not always you know, what meets the eye, right? Like she's so much more. She's so complex. She's so, words honestly can't describe. um, I'll just share a little tidbit before we dive into her myths. The Morrigan came to me probably, I don't know, about a year ago or so. And it was one of those things. I was in meditation. I was, um, working with like the element of fire and calling in this like dark goddess warrior energy. And I didn't know who was going to show up for me until it was the Morrigan. And it was almost like she was sizing me up. It was almost like, okay, who is this girl? Like in some weird way, I feel like she chose me. I choose to work with a lot of different deities, right? A lot of different goddesses. This is what my work is, right? Uncovering their myths, retelling their stories, and giving their stories and the deities themselves a voice, right? Reclaiming the divine feminine. And I feel like, the Morgan appeared to me. She wasn't at all who I was expecting. And I kind of just had to slowly start to explore and open up to her. Um, like I said, she's not direct in any of her messages, but nor is she subtle. Like she can be very much in your face. She is this powerhouse of energy, um, but she's very elusive and mystical in her messages, and it takes a lot of awareness, like to notice signs and symbols and interpret her messages, right? And they come in many different ways. And for me, my personal relationship with her, it's, here's just a little tidbit. I feel like she just leaves breadcrumbs, right, along this path. As the goddess of prophecy, she foretells a lot of things. And one of the lessons that she's given me is, our fate is not always set in stone. Whether you believe in destiny, life purpose, soul purpose, that you have one mission in life and that's your aim, she reminds us that we're also the co-creators, right? Yes, we might have like an end goal for our life, right? But it's also about the dance and the changes that we make and the routes that we take to get there, right? We always have a choice. We always have a choice. And what we choose to do can take us down two very different paths, right? But somehow we end up on, on the right path, on our destiny, fate, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to think how best to explain it, but I'm hoping that makes sense. Yes, that's one of the lessons that she has gifted me, is knowing that no matter what path I take, it's okay, right? We'll get there eventually, right? Um, so yeah, so let's dive in. So I have three myths, three stories I want to tell you today, to kind of give you one, a better understanding about the Morrigan, right? Who Morrigan is, and yeah, just yeah. So you know who she is, understand her. I'm trying to think what I want to start with first. I'll start with um, the first myth that she appears in is called the Battle Raid of Cooley. It appears in the Book of Invasions. Again, this was written like 1150 Common Era. So, yes, and it's essentially about how the Tuatha Dé Danann came to Ireland. The Tuatha Dé Danann are these magical deities. It's comprised of, the Daga and Danu and Morrigan and Brace, and um, they're seen as these strong and beautiful and almost fairy-like, ethereal um, deities. And they come through the mists into Ireland, and they, when they arrive at Ireland, they realize that they aren't the only inhabitants. The Firbolgs are the race who were there before them. And so they go to the Firbolgs and they say, hey, can we split the land? They send Grace, the god, to kind of, make arrangements to be like, hey, can we split this? And they refused. They're like, no, we were here first. The Firbolgs are seen as like misshapen and ugly, and this story has a lot of parallels to the Greek story, the Greek myth of the Olympians overthrowing the Titans, right? The Titans came first, and then the Olympians were like the new pantheon of gods, and they overthrew the Titans. So essentially, that's what the Tuatha Dé Danann did. They So after the Firbolgs refused the Tuatha Dé Danann and said, no, you can't stay here. No, we're not giving you half of our land. The Morrigan, distracted the Firbolgs for 3 days and 3 nights. It rained blood and fire. This was to help the Tuatha Dé Danann prepare for battle. So she is distracting the Firbolgs, and I'm sure they're like, what is going on? What is happening? And when it came time for battle, the Morrigan appears as a battle fury, screaming fear into the hearts of the enemy. And what she does is, when everybody's on the battlefield, the Firbolgs versus the Tuatha Dé Danann, she sets a boundary. She encloses the battlefield so that no one can leave. And what this does is it makes the Tuatha Dé Danann face their enemies. I mean, that's kind of terrifying, being like, it's kind of like the Hunger Games, right? Like, you're all thrown into this arena and you can't leave. You're fighting to the death. And that's essentially what happens. The Tuatha Dé Danann win, but by making the Tuatha Dé Danann face the enemy, right, and take down their enemy, she's instigating change, right? She's empowering them to step up and overcome their battles. And this is another theme with the Morrigan. Again, with the choices that we make, right? Every choice that we make instigates change. We have a choice to keep on living in misery and soul-sucking jobs and, doing the same thing, or we can choose to grow and evolve and get uncomfortable. That is one of the gifts of the Morrigan. Instigate change. Take a new path. Grow and evolve, right? And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, she's goddess of death. Well, what comes after death? Rebirth, right? In order to instigate change, things have to die. Things have to be released. Things have to be let go of, right? And it's uncomfortable. This death rebirth cycle is not for the faint of heart, right? It sucks. Giving up our comfort, giving up what we know, giving up, I mean, in a lot of ways that's what 2020 was, but instigating change, which causes us to grow, which causes us to be reminded of our own inner strength. Morrigan is also the goddess of sovereignty. She is all about personal power. And, meditating with her, she's fierce, she's ferocious, but she's powerful, and she reminds us of that. She is, the phantom queen of the otherworld. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from that myth and from what the Morrigan can teach us. The second myth that I wanted to talk about was the second battle of Mortua. So what happens is the Tuatha Dé Danann defeat the Firbolgs, right? They're taking over. They appoint Briss as their king. But, things can't be good all the time. So things kind of, start to waver, and the Fomorians come in, another race of people. So once again, the Tuatha have to battle the enemy. Celtic culture was all about battle. It was a warrior culture. It was a war culture, right? There's there's constantly raids and fighting and battles, and we see there's a lot of war heroes. There's a lot of myths about warriors, and that was just, how they lived. And so the Fomorians come in, and Morrigan prophesizes that the Tuatha can win, but only if the god Lugh fights with them. So she goes to Lugh, convincing him, you have to fight in this battle. You are the only way that we will protect our land and defeat the Fomorians. And so they're preparing for this. Lugh he's on board. He's going to fight. And Daga, who is not only the All-Father, I kind of refer to him as Odin, but he's like this big, jolly, just joyous god. He represents life and abundance, and it's kind of like Santa Claus. He's just like the big old jolly guy. So he is sneaking off to spy on the enemy. He's going to go spy on the Fomorians. But as he's doing that, he comes to the river and sees the Morrigan bathing herself in the river. Some describe her as actually, in human form bathing in the river. Some say she's got one foot on each bank straddling the river, bathing herself, right? However big she might appear. And the Daga, who represents life, and the Morrigan, who represents death, decide to come together in union. And, they have sex, they make love, and they're united. And after that, she prophesizes, okay, we're going to win this battle. And it's seen as the masculine and feminine coming together and sealing their fate. And it's this beautiful, divine union. And after that, they go off and win the battle, defeat the Fomorians, all is well. And it's that myth very much, represents our own inner masculine and feminine energies that we have to keep in balance, right? We're constantly on this life cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And it's just this beautiful symbiotic relationship. The fact that it's in the river, the elements of water meeting with the elements of earth. Water is emotional, feminine, like the ocean. The earth is the structure, it's the masculine, it's, support. That's all I have to say about that. The third myth that the Morrigan appears in is with the war hero, the most well-known in Celtic mythology, Cuchulainn, and he is a warrior right from the beginning. So his name is Satana, and then he ended up defeating this guy's guard dog, and so after that he's known as Cuchulainn, which means the Hound of Cuchulainn. Morrigan visits him several times throughout his life. The first time, he's married, newlywed, living with his wife, kind of taking care of the county. He's in charge of all the cattle, and he's sleeping one night, and he hears these screams that jolt him awake, and he runs outside in such a hurry to figure out what's going on that he's completely naked. He forgot to bring his clothes. So his wife's running after him, wait, here's your clothes. And he comes across this red-haired goddess, this red-haired woman dressed in red with this man next to her. And it's said that they're traveling in a chariot pulled by a horse with one leg, one eye, and one ear. Just picture that. And they have a cow with them. And Cuchulain's like, okay, what are you doing to this cow? Who does this cow belong to? And he's speaking directly to the gentleman. And the gentleman's like, it's ours, like it's hers. It's referring to the red-haired woman that he's with. And Cuchulain basically like refuses to acknowledge her, right? This is like patriarchy coming in like man to man. Um, and he's like, I don't believe you. And he makes her like go through all of these tests and like he just keeps disrespecting this woman. And finally, she turns into a crow. And that's when he realizes he is in the presence of Morrigan. He's in the presence of a goddess. And still, he refuses to acknowledge that that's her cow. Like, thinking like she must have taken it. It doesn't belong to her. She has no authority here. She has no authority over him. So, from then on, the Morrigan says, I am going to guard your demise. It's essentially what she's prophesied. I will guard your demise. I won't take it. I will guard it. So, over time, Cuchulain, the war hero, fights in many battles, and as he's preparing for his next one, he is guarding a river. And the Morrigan comes to him, appears to him, disguised as the daughter of a king. And she basically offers herself to him, and he refuses her. So she says, I offer to help you in battle. Again, he refuses her. So she turns in, she reveals her true identity as the goddess, and says, you keep refusing me. In the midst of the battle, at the height of the battle, when you were the most busiest, I will attack you 3 times. Once as an eel, once as a heifer, once as something else. She's going to attack him 3 times. And he's like, okay. Like, he's like a demigod. If he attacks her, or she attacks him and he strikes her, she won't be able to heal herself, right? He has to be able to heal her. So he's like, whatever, it's fine. So in battle, she attacks him 3 times. And after the end of the battle, she appears to him as an old woman with a cow and offers him milk to, essentially quench his thirst and help him after a battle. And he blesses her, thus healing her from his strikes, from his blows. And this is where we get the Morrigan as a shapeshifter, appearing to him in all of these different ways. Shapeshifting as the king of the daughter of the king, as the eel, as the cow, as this old woman, constantly tricking him into healing her. And as the goddess of war and battle, she wants to support him. She offers herself to him. She offers her help in battle. And again, he constantly refuses her. And this is Cuchulain's demise. This is his refusal to accept help from a goddess, one, but also to acknowledge the feminine, the divine feminine. And Morrigan herself, no matter how she appears to him, it hurts him. It hurts him in the long run. So years pass, and Cuchulain, as a war hero, has made a lot of enemies. And he's heading off to battle, and he comes across a washer at the ford. And essentially what this is a phantom woman seen washing the blood out of the war hero's clothes. It's always a signal of, The end is near. And he's like, it means nothing. You know, all in his strength and arrogance, like, I'm not going to worry about that. It's fine. So he passes the washer at the ford. And he goes and he sees these 3 crones cooking dog meat and offers, to feed him before battle. Now, Cuchulainn, as a war hero, he has 2 geeses, were essentially like vows that he must obey. And his first vow is that he never refuses food from anyone. His second vow is that he doesn't eat dog meat. The dog is like um, his namesake, right? He's the Hound of Culan. So after, he defeated that dog in his youth, he's like, I'm never going to eat dog. I'm honoring the Hound. But the Morrigan here appearing as 3 crones, tricking him essentially, right? Offering him to feed him and offering him dog meat. He can't break one vow without, he's got to break one of them, right? Either refusing food or refusing to eat the dog. It's one and the same. So he eats the dog meat and he goes off to battle. And he's struck down. And he's defeated. And he meets his end. And it's said that a raven comes and perches on his shoulder, guarding his demise. The Morrigan carried him into the other world. This is the symbol of the crow. This is, why they were so feared and I feel like very misunderstood, because so many myths and legends, when you see the crow, it signifies death, right? It's because of the Morrigan. It's because of her stories. Crows would be seen circling the battlefield after a battle is done, essentially, picking pieces of the remains of the bodies. But what she was doing is carrying them to the other world. So she was the guardian of his death in the end. She prophesied his death. She tricked him several times along the way, which, just kind of gives you a glimpse into her character, right? She's not going to be direct. She's not going to be straightforward in her messages, but she will guide you. She will guard you. She will protect you. And I'm still, working with any deity, it's a lifelong journey, right? You can read all of the myths, and this is a great place to start, is, to pick up a book and read them yourself, or just to meditate with her and sit in her energy and invoke her and invite her in. And you never know. You never know what's going to come up, right? And that's why I love working with deities. It's why I love working with goddesses. It's why we, pick a new one every single month. Like, okay, what's this energy? What's the message going to be? What can we learn from her? What are the gifts of the goddess? So I hope doing this, having the story time, talking about the Morrigan, her stories, her myths, what she represents, my own personal, viewpoint and relationship with her. I hope that gives you just a little glimpse. But I encourage you to dig deeper, to ask questions, to meditate with her, and then, meditate again, dig into some stories. What does the crow mean to you? What does the other world, what does that look like? The goddess of prophecy. I know in our guided meditation, we're, looking into the cauldron, and I've read so many books with like the Morrigan, and they always cast her as the bad guy, and it's as the enemy, but she's always guiding. She's always there, testing us almost, like giving us choices, right? Which path are you going to take? Which path are you going to choose? So, if this has been beneficial, if you've enjoyed this, um, let me know. Let me know, and then we can continue to do this. Um, I I like this better. Again, separating the goddess from our new moon ceremony just gives us more time to talk about the goddess specifically and her energy. So, um, yes, my plan is to do this every month for our featured goddess. So, I'll leave that there, and I will see you in the comments. Feel free to send me a message if you have any additional questions, need any support, anything at all. Enjoy. Have a good day.